Welcome to the NSTHA SLS World, Episode 2. I am the Chief.
And I am Mrs. A.
Today we're going to be covering...
We're going to be talking about tests and videos in particular. It's just another name for our own personal videos and the tests and videos that will be coming from either of us.
We're going to start this episode with viewer email.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. A.
Today's viewer email her name is Lily.
Hello, Lily.
Hello. And Lily sent this email in, and its subject is GhostTube SLS. This was her reaction to the first episode of NSTHA SLS World. So she says, "Welcome back online. I was happy to see your new video this week. The SLS app is new to me, and I also searched a bit on YouTube after watching yours. I tried the app at home and looked out of the window. Then I turned around and saw a being relaxing on my sofa, and it freaked me out. I got chills all over my body and every cell, even while I shouted to get out and tried to contain them sans camera. It really gave me a sensory overload that I haven't felt in maybe several years. Even typing this out, I feel the same sensation, but mildly. I feel nervous to open the app again. I think Mrs. A mentioned in the video the app can sense a wide range of entities, but not all. I'm also curious because in another video announcing this app from a year ago, it says it uses LiDAR technology that is only available on iPhone X and higher. I don't have an iPhone, so I'm wondering, is what I saw real?" Do you want to answer this?
Yeah, what you did see is real. You don't necessarily need LiDAR for the SLS to work.
The LiDAR is another function of GhostTube. GhostTube has several other filters. Some turn it purple or green, or they do like a heat sensing kind of filter. It's just another function. But we personally have just used the regular GhostTube SLS app filter, which just has normal lighting, no weird colors, and you still get really interesting videos, and you can still see interesting entities and things like that sort.
I don't know if she said what the entity that was sitting on the couch did, whether he left or not, but you definitely picked up something that's in your apartment. But we can go ahead with...
Yes, more will be answered as we go along with the letter.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what is the best way to respond to these entities? If we don't know if the entity is on our side or just a feeder.
Well, in reality, the majority, if not all the entities that you're going to run into are feeders. They're not on your side. It's about acquiring essence from you. And they get their essence through your discomfort or your fear. So the best way to respond to these entities is through containment. Now, not just any containment, not this covering someone with light and all that business. Literally, my containment. So I believe that because of the beginnings of, or starting this particular channel having to do with SLS, I should offer containment.
The reason why the entity just remained in the same position for a while was that you have not been approved to use Chief's containment yet. So even though you wanted to use it, he just kind of sat there.
Yeah, well, also, one of the benefits of using SLS does pick up the entities. There are individuals who will come in and say that they're doing a clearing in your house, but they don't have anything to show you any proof of it. You have to take their word. You may feel that the atmosphere feels a bit clearer, which means in most cases that entity may have just decided to move outside of the detection of whoever is supposed to be doing the clearing. And then they'll come back in afterwards. There are times that whoever's clearing may not be such a person with that much light, and they may be making deals. So also, they can make a deal in a sense with the density that's in your place, where it may go into more passive feeding, which means that you may think that your place is clear, but it isn't. And their way of getting essence, because each entity is like a person. Not all of these entities are human, so there's a number of them have been ghosts, There are those who have been, who've never been human. There are those who like to call themselves demons. I don't really buy into the demon thing. It's just a dense entity that may have been able to gather more essence from other entities and so on and so forth, thus seeming like it has more ability, more poltergeist ability. Is it a demon? It's just a name. For me, it doesn't matter to me. They're dense. And I don't care what their name is. I don't care if they call themselves Satan, Beelzebub, or whatever the heck they want to call themselves. They're just a dense entity that vibrates at a certain level. So my containment is very effective when it comes to these types of individuals. Now we're going to have a follow-up video on how to use containment, but also in order for you to acquire containment, you have to become a Patreon member. Ms. A can go into some of the details right now.
The details, okay. So just to give you a sneak preview as to what's going to be on that containment video, she's going to do the exercise on how it's done, the details, and he's going to talk about the prerequisite to acquire the ability to use Chief's containment to be eligible. Yeah. And there are stipulations, there's your attitude and other details, which will all be covered in that video, and we will read through the list and everything will be clear. But like she said, Patreon is a part of how we know that you're going to request containment specifically on Patreon. You have to send a direct message to our NSTHA Patreon account. So it is www.patreon.com/theneoshamanic. So as Chief already answered one of your other questions, but he might have some extra things to say. The next question she asked was, what about those ghost hunters that we see that don't have your tools like containment and yet they still see activity? What happens to them? And you answered that. You said sometimes they make deals and things of that sort. Yes.
I would say that your majority of ghost hunters out there are just novices. They're just people who are just trying to find, it's almost like they're bored or something or looking for something to do. Or some just figure maybe that's how they'll get, make a name or get attention for themselves. But I would guarantee you that the majority of them out there don't know what they're doing. So also just walking into places, there are things that you should do before you even walk into an abandoned building and so on and so forth. And also, if you know the location, when we know the location of where we're going to be visiting, or my trainees are going to be visiting, I always check out the place before they even show up. So if you've seen an example of it on one of the more recent paranormal reports, having to do with the Hollywood cemetery.
Yes.
And you'll see a mass of I shouldn't say light beings, these guys are not light beings, but they're entities, and I have something to offer them. That's different from ghost hunters. They have nothing to offer. A lot of times they come in and then they start to make demands of whoever is willing to listen to them. Move this, make this light go up and go down, and so on and so forth. There are generally a number of entities or so-called ghosts who are in these places who will not give you the time of day. And Miss Oracle L, and what she sees in some of these videos, including this guy, Zach, and he has his show that's been going on for, I guess well over 10 years maybe or something like that, where he'll be in a space and literally challenging a ghost to show up, but he doesn't see them. But Ms. Oracle L is watching it, and she sees the ghost literally approach this person, and he's still going, show yourself, and the ghost is literally showing himself, but he's unable to see him.
In SLS World, Episode 1. Chief has already taught us about how there's different dimensions of things going on, and the SLS app will pick up certain dimensions, and so Miss Oracle L sees things that are happening on other dimensions, and most people can only see things on very few dimensions.
Yeah, it's like what I would call this dimension level 1, just for a name for it. And then there's level 2, where most people who have sight will see ghosts and things like that. Then there's level 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now, density generally doesn't go past, I would say, level 6, dimension 6. And for them to get to that level, they have to have, I should say, stolen quite a bit of essence in order to be able to jump from those particular dimensions. So when you see the ones that are right next to this dimension, I should say level 2, dimension 2, those you'll find individuals who have recently transitioned out, passed on, or other entities that literally just feed from that dimension. Now, you will hear stories about like shadow people, which has been something that has been really, I shouldn't say it's been catching on, but it's been around for a long time. But more and more people are feeling comfortable talking about this stuff, which is good, you know. But shadow people are not always shadow people. They can change into something that looks very physical. And I've had my experiences with them in the past, where a shadow person walks out of the shadows in my bedroom at night and then transforms into a physical person, looking like a physical person. So again, there are a lot of different things that go on in these different dimensions or on the other side, so to speak. And no two entities are into exactly the same thing. But the things they do have in common is feeding. And therefore making you uncomfortable, causing you to, blast out essence, and then they consume it. Not unlike what I have mentioned before, not unlike Monsters, Inc. But they made it into a cartoon or a cartoon animation, computer animation, where they come in with the tanks and they make it scream and then they absorb the scream. They weren't lying. They're absorbing literally your fear into but they're not walking around with tanks. They will absorb that into their energy. And then when they return back to where they have to return to, they have to distribute that, So not every one of them belong to the same system. It's just very much like in this world, there are different clubs in different countries, different cultures, different ways of behaving, but they all answer to the same thing. They all have to feed that essence to that which is along the highest levels of, I guess, their pyramid. So with that, go ahead.
Please correct me, Chief, if this is not correct, but I've observed people, because she says, what happens to these ghost hunters who don't have your tools like containment and they still see activity? I noticed that some of them do end up, can get sicknesses from just interacting, and they don't have enough to deal with whatever they're seeing or whatever they're experiencing or wherever they're going, because not only can whatever the ghosts in the place be haunting, but the whole building itself can be haunted.
Yes, be haunted, and also they can go in there and pick up attachments. So they can literally take something home with them. They also, there are stories of individuals that actually get physically accosted, also walking into these places. And some of that may have to do with the number of these novices who are going in, for a scare, and then they get a scare, but they're feeding what's in there. So by the time the next group of novice ghost hunters come in, this thing has more juice, it has more essence. And so it has an ability to move more things in this realm. And you'll find that when people move into houses, whether that house has just been built or whether that house has been around for a couple hundred years or whatever, there may be things in there that are kind of weak because no one's been in the house for a while. But if you pay attention to some of the stories having to do with the paranormal, it usually ramps up over time. They may be in there for about a month or a week, and then all of a sudden they hear some noises or something like that, or some tapping, or steps, someone walking around or something like that. And every time someone hears it, their hackles go up, which means their valves open up and they start feeding that essence out. And if you hear someone say, "Oh, I wasn't afraid," don't believe that. I don't know what they're trying to pull, but I can read when someone's afraid. And if the activity is building and I'm not afraid, it means that somebody's feeding these things. And after a certain point, the poltergeist activity starts up. Throwing pots and pans, opening up cabinets, opening doors and slamming doors, and so on and so forth. And eventually they get to the point where they have enough where they can literally, we've even seen videos of being pulled and dragged out of their beds or pushed and things like that. That has to do with feeding them with your fear or your stress and your tension. Now, dealing with that is easier said than done, but that's why containment is very, very good. Yes. My containment, mind you. So I work on a very different energetic level. Therefore, you can try to pretend and do containment. You might just be getting yourself into trouble if you don't go through my channels. So rather than try to fake it or use some other processes or whatever, which will more than likely aggravate them, sometimes they'll just literally sit there and laugh at you and then go about their business and figure out what they're going to do to you next. So anyway, with that.
Yes. Okay. So this is just the end of the letter. It says, "Thanks again for all that you two do. Also, the new mic is great. I can hear you guys so much better without having to wear headphones."
Well, thank you for the input, and really, thank you so much, Lily, for sending your email.
Yes.
And
we really appreciate, respectful, polite, and interesting letters. And for you, Lily, if you want containment, you want the real deal, just join Patreon. Join it at the highest level and just send a direct message and say, this is Lily. I would like to be eligible to use containment, the tool of Chief's containment. Then you will receive whether you are approved or not from the NSTHA support team. Yes.
Also, to verify, there is a way of verifying whether you have literally, we're going to let you know whether you've been, in other words,
The confirmation email from the NSTHA support team will be the actual beginning of when containment starts.
Yeah, and on the video. For you to know whether it's working or not, or whether, it's kicking in, you're going to hold your hands, something that I used to do during the forums, your hands approximately 6 to 12 inches apart, and you should start to feel the tingling between your hands, your fingertips, your palms, and your hands. That means you've been activated. And then from there, you can SLS and then test to see how it works. And also let us know how it goes and how it works and your experience with it.
Yes, you can send a direct message to us on the NSTHA Patreon account, and then you can tell us, what has happened. Chief said to share your experiences, but no suggestions, because Chief is the ultimate word on everything that has to do with containment, because it is his tool. It is your tool.
Yeah, something that literally I have created.
Yes.
So it belongs to no one else. All right.
Yes, and this tool that is Chief's can end. So if you decide to I don't want to continue, or I don't want to continue Patreon, then it will end at that point. And you'll know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's also certain types of behavior that will cause it to end also. But that'll be covered in the video.
In the video. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you very much, Chief.
Okay.
Okay, so next thing we're going to be moving on to is the tests and videos. So this particular test that Chief suggested that he let me do is he's like, why don't you just try first? This was the first video that we ever did, which inspired SLS World. He told me to go out there and try using the app. So I was sitting at a gas station and I was like, oh, maybe I should try it. So I turned it on. And I literally saw, first was just a stick figure very close to the front of Chief's truck. And then after that, I saw a stick figure stand in the place where the attendant was pumping gas for the car in front of me. And then it started to pretend to pump gas. And it was just like holding on to it and then disappeared. And I asked Chief, I was like, is that really what I saw? And he's like, yes, it's the ghost of someone who used to work at that gas station. So that was just one of the first tests. Did you have something to say, Chief?
No. That's
okay. So that was the introduction into this test. I dislike about when I'm walking, and just in general, there's always these mannequins. I'm sure they're around in the world, mannequins, and also these life-size posters of people. They may be pop stars or whoever they may be, that promoting the product or whatever, but I always feel kind of a little bit spooked when I pass by these cutouts or
where you're talking about places like malls and
malls,
shopping centers.
Any shopping centers, yes.
Yeah, and if you've ever walked past any of these cutouts that they have, usually of some model or someone who's maybe a pop star or something, and they have some kind of deal with that particular chain, and you walk past. And you may feel like, well, it's just optical illusion where it looks like the eyes of the person of the cutout is following you, almost like one of those old haunted house movies where they have the paintings with the eyes that follow you back, as you pass by.
Yes.
But I don't know if anyone, unless you're really shut down, has ever walked past one of those things at some point in time and felt like you were being watched. You just say, wow, that's a really good, poster. It actually feels like someone's in there watching me. The reality of the matter is that there is something in there watching you. And you're going to see what Ms. is going to put on the videos that we're going to include in this episode.
Yes, Chief had to eventually tell me, okay, that's enough videos because, the cutouts were just everywhere. So I had eventually accumulated quite a few, which I'll show on this video. And each one, you could sense, if you have a sense of things, which Chief activated the sense that I have so that it was a lot stronger now these days. So I'm able to feel kind of the personality from the entity that's in the cutout. So whether it was a female cutout or a male cutout, it changed. So for example, one of these cutouts was a woman, and when I went there, I put the SLS out and I put my hand up and I waved at the stick figure, and it waved back at me, and I was like, oh, okay.
I think she might have found it maybe curious that you were actually able to pick her up in some way, shape, or form. Because you ran across one of these particular types of cutouts, and you said I believe you said one of them just decided he was going to ignore you.
Yes. Well, one entity, I have a stick figure. It was as I was looking up a staircase, and there was a cutout of a man, a pop star, I believe, and the entity that was in the cutout, he didn't give me any attention. So there was also another test that I did, and it wasn't necessarily on a cutout, but it was on a figurine of Ronald McDonald outside of McDonald's. It just so happened that I was waiting to cross the road, and I decided to just see if I could find something on SLS. And I found a cooler on the back of a motorcycle, and there was this tiny stick figure, and it was riding the cooler like it was a horse. And I at first I was like, what is going on? And then I turned, and then I went to the Ronald McDonald figurine, and there was a stick figure in it as well, and I waved at him, and he looked around behind him like what is she waving at? And then he just he did not break his pose. He didn't come out of character, which was very interesting. Go ahead, you have something?
Oh, no.
And then I went home and I told Chief, and he said that actually that small stick figure that was riding the cooler was actually a child ghost. And there's quite a bit of those.
Yeah. And I would say that the one that was sitting inside of the life-size figurine maybe thought you were just weird.
Yeah.
Thought you were just waving at the at the figurine. It's like, this woman doesn't look like she's crazy. Well, so why is she waving at the figurine? That's why he's looking around. He had to be waving at some other live person.
Yeah.
But he didn't realize that you were able to detect him in the figurine.
Yes. But now we're gonna go to where they knew that I could detect them. It was really, really interesting. After the NSTHA on the road, the first episode. It really seemed to affect things in a way that I'd be just walking through the grocery store, and I would feel something trying to get my attention. You have some thoughts?
No, you can go ahead,
Okay.
because I was just going to add that folks have, with SLS, which is really cool about it, that it is something that I'm not sure, again, whether the system wanted to expose so much of what's on the other side through this app, or maybe they were just wanting to creep you out. And I would imagine it was maybe designed to creep people out, because most people don't really have an effective means to literally contain these things and to keep them from feeding on them, or to keep them from making them feel very uncomfortable. So you're walking around and you have no idea how many things out there are just placed in certain areas to just literally feed off of you. So it's what you're getting ready to talk about, I think, in that particular shop has to do with the dinosaurs?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Whenever I saw these
I should say dinosaur toys.
dinosaur
Sorry.
toys,
Yeah,
that's right.
Sorry.
So it was right after we just released the NSTHA Paranormal Report on the Road, the first episode, and in that episode,
This was the one in Hollywood.
Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
Okay.
And there were so many entities that came out in respect for Chief's deal, and in exchange for Essence to make the video interesting and to wave, and that was what really got attention on the other side. So much so that even in Thailand, I received a lot more feeling like I need to pull out SLS, and I was just walking by these little toy T-Rex, a bunch of T-Rexes. I don't know how the plural of
T-Rex
T-Rex.
toys.
T-Rex toys.
Mm-hmm.
All in a row on these shelves, and it just because you can feel when something's kind of staring at you, and I pulled it out, and there was so much activity. They were just running around. They were just moving so quickly, and then at the end they were even pretending like they were dinosaurs, which was very cute. And I just thought, and they told me, they're like, tell Chief, put in the word for us, we want to work. And so that was really interesting part of the test that you let me do. So that was quite exciting. But that is just a part of the test. There will be different types of tests. Some will be Chief's personal tests that he's done, where we have a lot in store. This is just the first part of haunted items. So
yeah, it's like a precursor.
Yeah, precursor to haunted items. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, haunted items don't necessarily have to come from someone who's had a tragic
Yeah.
experience. So you're ending up with haunted items that are straight from the manufacturer, from the company that manufactures these things. Cars that individuals, over decades, individuals would buy a new car and they call it a lemon. It's a brand new car, but for some reason it won't run correctly and they'll take it to the shop over and over again. This is also a haunted item as well. So what you would consider, someone would consider a lemon is also a haunted item. So there's something, either some component in that vehicle that has a major attachment to it, or the whole vehicle in itself may have an attachment to it. Now there are people who have owned vehicles and they become so attached to it that some part of them, when they transition out, stays connected to that vehicle, and it will reflect the personality of that person. And I have had experience with purchasing a vehicle. It wasn't an intense haunting, but I had bought a very nice vehicle. And every time I would drive that vehicle on the highway in upstate New York, a truck would flick some gravel and hit that windshield every time I took that vehicle out. And so on a trip from New York to Michigan, I was going through Canada, and we ended up on a road, and another 13-wheeler threw up a stone and hit the windshield, and then got a crack all the way along the windshield. So the way that insurance worked, at the time, free glass and whatever. So at that time, I really needed to just change the windshield, which was cool, because it had all these little nicks from every time I would go out there. Not every time we would create a nick, but I started getting these nicks in the windshield. So once I took it and had the windshield replaced, which was kind of interesting because there was something very much connected to the windshield that was wanting to cause a problem with the windshield being replaced, but that's another story. But once I finally got that windshield replaced correctly, I never had another stone hit that windshield over the next several years that I owned that vehicle. So haunted items, you have no idea how many things can be haunted and various levels of haunt. Okay.
Yes, that is definitely something. When we're searching the internet, most people do have that common concept that, it has to be old, something tragic has to happen. And you were saying, do you think, Chief, sometimes people's focus on an item or intent towards it, that it may not have been haunted at the time, but because they have a feeling towards it, then it is more ideal for entities to be in it.
Well, yeah, I will agree on that. And also, if you feel something is haunted or a doll or something like that, and it's creeping you out, then you're feeding it. And it behaves in a certain way to get you to feed it. The system, movies and things that you watch are part of the system. They're all just tuning you up so that you will feed these particular things. So with the horror movies, the Chucky doll or whatever, they make these dolls that look like Chucky and they say, oh, that's really creeped out. And some people get creeped out faster and easier than others. And those are the ones that they feed off of the easiest. So yeah, you can actually open something up to absorb a consciousness in it, depending on how you treat that object. So if you're personifying a doll that may not have an attachment, it may end up with one eventually. Or sometimes there's some fragmentation of your own consciousness that will be absorbed into that. And you may not have a problem with it. It may be very, very comfortable. When you're a kid, you may feel that that object is real because you're giving it a certain type of life. But nonetheless, they all feed in some way, shape, or form. And objects like that you're comfortable with, your teddy bears or so on and so forth in your bed, those can be passive feeders. It doesn't mean that every stuffed toy you have has something in it. But if you're using the SLS, you'll find out pretty quickly. Yeah.
The last thing that goes along with your topic and had to do with the test that you approved of was that it wasn't just the cutouts, it wasn't just the mannequins, and it wasn't just the figurine, it was also a painting. There was this really big bus, and I was driving by, and then I felt something, very dense on the right side of my face, and I was like, I turned and looked, and it was the painting of the Joker and his girlfriend, Harley. And I was like, ugh. So I busted out the SLS, and I saw stick figures in the faces. But they quickly disappeared as soon as I pulled out my phone.
Yeah, well, it got discovered and then they decided to bounce.
Yeah.
But they jumped into certain things that people were going to give a certain amount of attention to or a certain reaction to. So there may not have been initially an attachment in those items, but those are created primarily to feed. All these little horrific little characters, these little comic book villains and so on and so forth, they're there for a reason. Everything here has to do with feeding the matrix, feeding the system. So people look at, oh, Joker, oh, wow, he has a creepy face. Just by their attention and by how they feel, they're actually feeding that image. So of course there's going to be something in there to receive that essence that you're throwing in the direction of that image, creepy photos and so on and so forth. We have done videos with the first episode of SLS World where we're looking at videos and seeing things moving around. Now, the mind blower is that these images, it can be some old photos that will react in real time with you through the SLS. There are images of beings that are in certain photos that tried to get my attention. And then once we SLS, there's a stick figure waving its hands frantically trying to get my attention. Yes. And so not every stick figure is going to be dense, but the majority that you run into will.
Yeah, so stay tuned to SLS testing videos and you'll get to see these consciousness, whether they're entities or light beings, in the image interacting with Chief.
Yeah.
And that will be really interesting. So is there any last words that you have?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
Again,
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again with SLS World. And as Ms. A said, stay tuned for more.
Yes.
You know, we're slowly working the kinks out of this. Yeah. So bear with us. This is definitely a shift in how we're doing things. But again, we welcome polite emails. So I don't have patience for nonsense. You know, I'll just blatantly put it out there. Don't have patience or time for nonsense. Okay? So thank you again, everyone, and stay tuned for our upcoming videos.
Bye-bye.
So long.